Freedom. What does it mean? What does it even mean to be free? Physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. I believe it's all of these and they're interconnected. We have freedom to use our voice. We have freedom to make decisions. We have freedom to live our life. We have freedom to be who God designed us to be. And our ultimate freedom comes when Jesus sets us free, because then we are free indeed, spiritually. Being free physically is vitally important, and it may not always mean what we think it means. For example, we may not always be free to do whatever we want, whenever we want. We actually often have responsibilities or maybe physical limitations. Sometimes we have a goal set before us that we've had the freedom to choose, and then we have the freedom to unchoose that goal. A good example would be someone who wants to run a marathon, and they decide it's going to take so much extra effort that they change that goal and make their goal more realistic for them and decide to run a 5K. But now let's dig into what it means to be emotionally and mentally free. There's a lot out there about our emotions, about our mental health. So buckle up. Let's just lean in a little bit here because I believe it's worth spending some time on. And this deep dive is going to even include looking at a compost pile. So be ready. Our mental and emotional freedom are very closely connected. This is because our thoughts actually fuel our emotions. That's right. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That means that your actual thoughts show up in your emotions and also your actions. But this doesn't mean if we only think good thoughts, then we're going to avoid all bad emotions. This human experience that we're in includes the good and the bad. It actually means that we experience a full range of emotions, and we actually can have the emotional resilience to know how to manage them. All of them, the good and the bad. We can trust ourselves to manage them when we have emotional resilience, which I include in the definition of freedom, because I believe having emotional resilience gives you some freedom that goes beyond the surface level of freedom. I think it's a deep dive. So when we aren't afraid of our emotions, when we face them and allow ourselves to process them, trusting ourselves to manage them, we actually create safety within ourselves and our environment instead of sweeping them under the rug where they cause a lot of harm. We can recognize the damage that could be done to ourselves or those around us when we carry around unprocessed emotions. I mean, have you ever been around someone who holds everything in until they explode? That's an example of someone who has not managed their emotions well. They haven't learned to process them in a healthy manner, and they're affecting them internally and when they explode, others around them. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, and I'm sure many of us have experienced it. So pushing an emotion away is not the best idea. There may be times that we have to pause the emotion or maybe restrain the emotion until we can process it in a healthy manner. But ultimately, we can lean into the emotion and see what it might be trying to tell us, because emotions are energy in motion. And some like to say they're like a little messenger that our body sends to us to pay attention to. And I'm going to use an analogy that I often use with my clients. It's one that I happen to love and use myself. And what that is we're going to consider that we allow an emotion because we have agency over our thoughts and our emotions. We can take our thoughts captive, and therefore we are taking our emotions captive right along with them. But I want you to think of yourself as choosing to allow an emotion to sit with you in your car. And when you do that, you are going to allow yourself to feel the emotion. You're going to name the emotion. You're going to even start to recognize how it makes you feel. And if it's been a long time you've been holding on to this emotion, you may find that it causes pain when you allow it. Maybe you feel a tightness in your chest or in your throat, or it may be in your lower back. Just allow it to sit for a few minutes. Breathe through it and be curious. But when you're ready, you are the one that gets to move it to the back seat because you're the one in charge. You're the driver of the car. So don't let it push your buttons. And remember, you even have the freedom to push it completely out of the car. If it's too difficult for the moment, you need a break. You can just push it right out of the car, which is much different than pushing it under the rug because you've spent a little time with it. And if this emotion happens to return, it's likely to return. But if so, it'll be with less intensity, especially when you remind yourself how well you managed it the last time it visited. And you start to develop a new neural pathway that includes emotional resilience and helps you feel stronger in managing your emotions. But always remember, you have the freedom, and this is emotional freedom we're talking about, which includes our mental health and our mental freedom. You have the freedom to take your thoughts captive and not allow your thoughts to take you captive. This includes the story that you tell yourself about your past, because you can even be free from a painful past by choosing to reframe your past. You can actually look at that story and things you went through and see some good that they may have brought, even from very difficult stories. Most people have at least a little bit of a difficult story. Yes, some people have horrifically difficult stories, but we do get to choose to look back at those stories and look for treasures. What happened in your story that changed you for the good? Did God bring you through that story stronger? Did He teach you something that you may not have ever learned without that difficult story? Is it possible that He was closing a door and opening up a brand new door for you? Is it possible that He protected you through your story and just carried you through it? All things work together for our good, for those who are His. And sometimes using that lens to look back at a very painful story can be a game changer. It can be difficult. It's not easy. I'm not claiming that it's easy, but it's possible. Because just imagine for a minute, if good can come from a compost pile, don't you think some good can come from our hard stuff too? Because think about decomposing things sitting in a compost pile. They get quite icky, but there's not a waste to that. Because as it is processed, yes, even in the midst of it processing, the icky stuff, the hard stuff, the stinky stuff, it produces abundant growth. But I'm going to have to say that on the contrary, if we don't deal with some of our icky stuff, our most painful stuff, our decomposing stuff, we may end up stuck in our story. Or sometimes we mitigate our story into a form of false freedom. That's when we feel like we're free, but we're really struggling deep within. Sometimes that shows up as behavior management. Sometimes it shows up as we abandon ourselves and we sacrifice our own needs and just simply serve everyone else around us. Sometimes that looks like people pleasing. Sometimes we even use controlling behaviors to avoid dealing with the icky stuff. Let's just break this down, pun intended. Ask yourself if you find yourself using one of these mitigating behaviors. Maybe let's choose the controlling one because it's a very common behavior. What caused you to feel the need to control? And be curious. Is there something from your past that caused you to feel the need to control? Was there a lack of control at some point in your life? And maybe you even made a little promise to yourself that I'll never be in that situation again. And so now the way that you avoid that difficult situation again is that you swung to the other side. And you find yourself controlling your environment or relationships even more than necessary. Wouldn't it be freeing to be healed from that? Because those controlling behaviors can be exhausting. How do you do this? I think it can start with curiosity. I also think it can start with a simple prayer, asking God just to search you and show you what you need to heal. I think it can also start with some attunement. Having someone listen to your story, having someone hear the hard things, and just hold some space for you. God is so good at this. Imagine really sharing your story. He already knows it. Maybe you want to spend some time journaling it. I always have clients journal because I feel like it's very healing to actually put it in writing. You don't have to share it with anyone, but just simply to take it out of your head. Those thoughts that are rambling around about your story, put them onto paper and just see how much good can come from that exercise itself. God actually designed our brain to protect us, to conserve energy, and to seek pleasure. So let's look at some of the ways our brain is designed. Our limbic brain actually holds on to memories for us. The amygdala is our alarm center. Our hippocampus regulates the amygdala. And then what happens when someone experiences little t or big T trauma, the amygdala and the hippocampus don't communicate with each other as well as they're designed to. So the trauma ends up bringing some shame, usually false shame, because often trauma is not something that we chose, but we often experience the shame of that trauma. I just want to remind you that having someone listen and attune to your story can bring it to light, and that alone can help you begin to heal. You don't have to fight to be heard or respected. You can lay down that sword. You can find comfort in being heard and healed. All forms of trauma, little t and big T, need to find attunement, to find some comfort. And often that happens in a safe place with someone you trust. If it's not tended to, is when it turns into shame. And shame usually leads to isolation. A person who is self-shaming often feels unworthy or like there's something wrong with them. And then the enemy loves to use that against you, and you end up in a spot where you feel disgusted with yourself, or worse, maybe some self-hatred toward yourself or those around you. All of this is worth some healing for sure. If you notice an old story or emotion returns to ride in your car, I want to encourage you to lean in and dig a little deeper. Be curious to see if you can determine what's triggering that. Is it returning because you have been ignoring it? It's just trying to get your attention. Or the opposite. Is it returning because you're holding on so tight to that painful story that you are now hurting yourself with your story? Others have moved on, but you're holding so tight, it's like it's prickly, and it's hurting you every time you think on it. Could it be time to loosen your grip on your story and to allow some healing? Because you are in the driver's seat. You can be very curious with this memory and ask a few questions that will help so much more than avoiding it. You may even be able to figure out what the trigger or the wound is underneath the trigger. And this may lead to the healing you want. Because when we allow the emotions, that's like the baby step towards reframing our story. And both of those things can help to set us free. Because you see, the truth sets us free. As a believer, you have the freedom to walk in His love and grace. And who He sets free is free indeed. You can use the links below for more information on all of this. If this has brought up some questions for you, or you'd like to have a conversation around any of this, you can use the links below to reach out to work with me. I am a master coach certified in Christian life coaching, somatic work, brain health, and I'm trauma informed. I would be honored to hear your story and work with you.